The Lionesses have now gone 30 games unbeaten under Serena Wiegmann after winning the first ever edition of the Women's Finalissima, defeating Brazil 4-2 on penalties. So, let's talk about it. April 6, 2023, at Wembley Stadium, over 83,000 in the stadium, hosted the first ever Women's Finalissima between Brazil, the Copa America champions, and England, the Euros champions. Because of the nature of the competition, if the game was to end at a draw at 90 minutes at full time, there was not going to be any extra time, but rather they were going to go straight into penalty shootouts, and that's exactly what we got to see. It was a first half goal by Ella Toone, which put England up, but of course, because it's at Wembley, because it's the first edition of this competition, there had to be some extra drama, and Brazil made sure to equalize, literally like in the last 2 minutes of extra time of the game to push it into penalties. A very deserving 1-1 score, considering this game looked like a game of two halves. England very dominant in the first half, but that second half it was a different Brazil that we were able to see. Their pressure was on. They changed formations, which allowed them to push a little bit higher on the pitch and actually press England and not expose themselves too much to eventually cause some kind of chaos in the England box to score that equalizer. So looking at the starting 11 for England, nothing really massively surprising or major here. Clearly a very, very strong starting 11. But for me, when I start to look at these starting 11s and compare them to what the Euro starting 11 was, and if you don't remember, the starting 11 for the Euros did not change at all for any of the games. And both starting 11s are actually very vastly different, obviously given the injuries of Beth Mead and Millie Bright this time around. You have Ella Toone and Alicia Russo starting pretty much every single of the last few games. During the Euros, they were pretty much seen as impact subs. You also have Rachel Daly, who hasn't started in left back in a few games, and even if she is coming in, she's coming in as a forward, and this time around, she was starting on the bench. And another big one is Lauren James. Obviously, Lauren James wasn't even included in the Euro squad. There's obviously a fair bit more kind of those youngsters. You've got the Robinson, you've got the Lucy Parker being involved in the new call-ups. Another big one is Greenwood. Greenwood didn't start a single game in the Euros and has what in my eyes actually looked very, very good for England to what she's been starting in. You've obviously got your main core players, like the Leah Williamson, the Kara Walsh, the Stanway, those core holding players. You still have got those, but in a general sense, it's not a transitional period at all. I wouldn't necessarily call it that, but a different squad and kind of a different taste of the England that we're seeing now than a few months back. Similar conversation could be given to Brazil. Brazil are also coming in hindered, who are in a transitional period right now. I would say Brazil, they are kind of at the stage where they're pushing a lot of those older players out and they're involving all these kind of new uprising talent, which are fitting in really, really well in my opinion, despite the most recent losses. I have to remind you right now, the last 3 games that Brazil have been against reigning champions. They've gone against England, the US, and Canada, and they've lost all 3 of them. But in a way, I don't think it's actually reflective of how bad they're doing. The main reason I say that is because I just mentioned they are in a transitional period and trying to figure out their best starting 11 or those core players that they need to start depending on, and they need to figure out these super subs. So far, I don't think the substitutions in the last few games have been what they needed to be, and I think that is always a progress. But also, their problems have been very consistent, so it's not like they're showing up to each game and they have a different problem arising. It's consistent in a way. Having consistent issues, one tells you, okay, the issue is clear, but 2, it tells you kind of need to work on it, right? It's finishing in the final third and not losing so much focus in the back. Very physical. Obviously, Brazilian footballers, you know how physical they can get. So in the midfield, it's not so much of an issue, and in the back, it's also not so much of an issue, but they tend to lose focus, and that's not something you can afford to do, especially against the opposition that they're coming up against. For the final third, they have so much talent up there that it's, again, figuring out the best mixture of the best attacking forwards that you can start in the starting 11. And that attacking forward is also so important to how they press. And in that second half, we saw how good they can be when they press. They changed formation to more of like a 4-4-2, or even at sometimes changing shape to a 3-4-3. They did it very well, where they weren't necessarily exposing a lot of pockets in the back, where if England was onto a counterattack, or if they were caught in a counterattack, they could reposition themselves and they could still hold England's forwards where they were in a crazy amount of trouble. And in my opinion, this is probably the best takeaway that they had from this game, right? They had a very poor first half, changed some things in the second half, scored a late minute equalizer, able to adapt into changing shapes multiple times. And England have some of the most threatening counterattacks, and to be able to hold that well, I think that's some pretty good results. Dabinia, for me, is another very, very important player. You watch her, she's so good at the press. I mean, just her positioning, the way she can attack players, the way she can spot kind of spaces of where the ball can go. So important. Obviously, she was missing here, kind of still dealing with an injury preseason. Marta, another player that I was very excited to see her play. One, because to have Marta play at Wembley is just like a beautiful storyline. Unfortunately, we were also robbed of that. But I'm sure her experience would have added something to there. I'm sure her voice in the locker room would have also probably added something to there. She is, at the end of the day, their leader, whether on or off the pitch. So maybe missing her was also another aspect you can consider. On the record, it looks like another L for the Brazilians. They move on to face Germany now. Another very, very fun fixture. And I actually really admire what the Federation is doing here. They have come up against Canada, Japan, Canada, the United States, England, and now Germany in the last 5 or 6 fixtures. That is a great lineup. In fact, that's exactly the lineup you want going into a World Cup here. There is not any other nation right now that is getting as good of a lineup as Brazil is. You've got time until the World Cup. You've got a few months to plan, and you're testing out different routines, different players, different combinations, different subs. And that's exactly what you need. Coming up against different nations, different qualities, different skills. And I think Brazil are doing very, very good, despite contrary beliefs, I think, in my opinion. But I would love to hear what you think about this. For the Lionesses, not only do they get another trophy in the cabinet, not only do they get another boost of confidence going into the World Cup, but they were also caught in some trouble in the second half. And looking at the last few games, looking at the Arnold Clark Cup, they weren't necessarily caught in trouble. They don't really get caught in trouble because, one, they're just that good, but two, sometimes the opposition just doesn't challenge them enough, and Brazil, in my opinion, challenged them very, very well in that second half. England's main threats during the Euros and even now are always and have been their fullback. The first goal with Ella Toone, I mean, what a beautiful sequence of play, but that assist came from Lucy Bronze, a fullback. They disallowed Lauren James. It was an assist from Greenwood, who was playing a fullback. In the second half, when they were on counterattacks, Russo was getting some pretty neat balls from the back, which were also from fullback. They rely so heavily on their fullbacks, especially when they are being caught in trouble in the middle, which did happen quite often in the second half. They can kind of rely on these fullbacks pushing in, kind of allowing markers to possibly be drawn into them or possibly be drawn into their area where they can switch the play really fast. It's classic Lionesses play. Switch the ball fast, quick movement, great sequences, get the fullbacks involved, and you have a ton of available options up in the box. And that's just how good they are. They do it so well, they execute it so well, and they're so consistent with it. Obviously still a lot to work on for them because you don't want to be getting caught in a last minute goal or a last minute equalizer in the World Cup. So things to work on. That was some sloppy defending in the back. I thought Leah Williamson didn't maybe have the best of games, a lot of missed passes. Jess Carter was going backwards a little too often than I thought she should have. But again, they are missing Millie Bright. She hasn't not played a game in so long with them. It's understandable. There's kind of that lack of stability that they have had in the last few games. This was also the first time that the Lionesses have won a penalty shootout. In all fairness, this was the third one, so they've only had 3, but third one's a charm. They don't say that for no reason. But jokes aside, you think World Cup, you think a penalty shootout, right? That's obviously something that you are expected to be very well prepared for, to come in and be able to beat Brazil on a penalty shootout. Sure, obviously it's not World Cup level. There's not that much on the line, and I don't think it replicates exactly a World Cup shootout. A World Cup shootout comes after 120 minutes where your legs are a little bit more tired. Mentally, you're also a little bit more drained. So definitely not the exact replica of what you will see in the World Cup, but a good enough replica where you go in and you're not actually thinking, oh crap, the last penalty shootout we lost. This time you go in and you're thinking, last penalty shootout, we won. Mary Earp saved one, and then Hafayeli, the captain, missed and hit the bar, but good confidence either way, something to put properly on the record. And again, to think about the fact that this is only their first ever penalty shootout that they've won is just like crazy to think about. Kira Walsh, even though she was awarded player of the match, I think she was actually dealt with pretty well, and I don't think we got to see the Kira Walsh that we're able to see in that Lionesses setup. My player of the match would have probably been Yace Ferreira for Brazil, or Lucy Bronze, I thought, from England. Yace came close multiple times. There was a lot of times where the ball maybe didn't sit too well for her, not in a comfortable position for her to score, but definitely put that England defense in trouble a few times. They're fast and pacey, and again, this is exactly what England needed to come up against. An attacking line that's not afraid of pressing, that's not afraid of going at them, that's not afraid of taking some wild shots. And it was an entertaining game, I thought, for neutrals. I mean, as a neutral myself, I was just enjoying to see two big dogs go at it. Lauren Hemp looked like she did catch a nasty hit to the face and was bleeding and had to be taken off, but didn't look like there was any injuries, which is very, very important. Against a very physical side like Brazil, you I would assume always do get afraid that you catch a physical battle or something that you didn't necessarily want to engage in, and boom, you've catch an injury. So for them, it's good to see there's not too many bleeding faces. Speaking of injuries and in the current ACL crisis that we're in, for Chloe Kelly to have won the last two massive finals for England, obviously both of them at Wembley, it looks like Chloe Kelly and Wembley are just such a good duo. Chloe Kelly only got her first senior cap not too long ago, and has been recovering from an ACL injury, came back from an ACL injury, won the Euros with England, just now scored the winning penalty. I mean, she is a player that is showing a lot of these players that are sitting out with an ACL injury that, you know what, you can come back from an ACL injury and do what I'm doing right now. The timing of it is just like meant to be for Chloe Kelly to be smashing things like she is when we're going through an ACL crisis right now. And this game was another time that it got me thinking. Obviously, I watch these games from home. I watch these games very far away from England. I'm located in Canada. I've yet been able to experience a big Wembley crowd like this, but to have been able to see 80,000+ crowds in the last few months, I mean, happen week in and week out, is just such a great thing to see. It just makes me so happy. But you also have to give it up to England. The way they promote these games, the way they push these games, the way they have it so accessible and available on TV is they are putting a great tutorial for a lot of these nations. Obviously, the US women's national team has been doing this for a while and has been selling massive records and has been so accessible on TV, but to be able to widen it and do that in Europe now is exactly what we need. They're making big stadiums like Wembley. I mean, it is one of the most prestigious stadiums in the world, available for these women's matches. When you make it available, it hasn't been shocking me that we're able to see 90,000 tickets be sold. It hasn't been shocking me to see new records every other week. Look at the media campaigns. Look at how they're selling these tickets. Look at the media backing that they have. And again, look at the TV accessibility that they have. They're making sure they put it on prime time. They're making sure they are pushing it as best as they can, not just for England viewers to watch and tune in, but around the world as a whole. I obviously speak on this as an international viewer, as somebody who watches from continents away and who keeps up continents away, but I just can't help but express how good and happy this makes me feel and how positive I feel about the sport growth. It's exciting. This game was exciting. It was another reminder of how good the game is. It's another reminder of just the high standard it is at. And most importantly, it was a reminder, if you're tuning into a women's football match, you're guaranteed some good fireworks and you're guaranteed some very, very good games. And that's what I love about it. So I would love to hear if I have any UK viewers here telling me about it. If anybody went to the Wembley game, I'd love to hear how it was inside the stadium. The pictures and the videos that I've been able to see and I've received just the vibes look incredible. I cannot wait for me to one day make it out to big games like this in the UK. I'm wearing my London hoodie right now, actually, representing and whatnot, but I'd love to hear your opinion on this. What did you see of England? What did you see of Brazil? What have you made of this very, very fun game? And yeah, let's talk about it. Share your opinions. As always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. All of these podcast episodes are also available for you to listen for free on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So get listening.